I'm here in East London to talk to musician and poet Edge. But I'm not here to talk about his music. I'm not here to talk about his poetry. I'm here to talk about his life. A very specific time in his life. The time he became the victim of female perpetrated domestic violence. Welcome to From the Darkness. Welcome to From the Darkness, Edge, and thank you for speaking out. Before we start, just tell me a little bit about yourself and about your background.
My name's Itch. I'm a musician from London. That's sort of been my only job ever. Very lucky to be able to continue to make music. However, it's been increasingly difficult as the years have gone by because of a false accusation that's happened against me by this woman who abused me, who basically has destroyed my life and my livelihood, as it were.
Well, talking about your abuser, let's start at the beginning. And how did you meet?
We met through Tinder, and we were just chatting back and forth for a little while. And then one day I called her up. It was late. It was about 1 a.m. or something like that. And she was up. She got in a cab over to my house and didn't leave. She just ended up staying the night and pretty much moving in from that first day. So it was super intense. And I think there were certain alarm bells were going off, and my friends were going, "This is weird. You don't know anything about this woman. Why is she suddenly living at your house?" But for me, I'd just come out of a relationship. I guess I was rebounding. I'd come out of a healthy long-term relationship, and I was super down about it, and I was lonely, and she was sort of a ready-made girlfriend, ready to go, and I was like, cool, like, I'm lonely here you are, and things were all right at the start, things were cool, you know, and I enjoyed having her around. So that's how we met. It was sudden and it was very intense. And I was only with her for, I think, between 6 to 8 months in total.
Yeah.
But during that time, I saw her completely change. And I knew that she had sort of mental issues that were undiagnosed. And I'm not an expert. I'm not trained to diagnose what they are. But she's clearly unstable. And she was aware of that as anyone. And after a while, I would wake up to her just screaming, hitting me. It didn't take too long. It took maybe a month of her being super nice, super sweet, to her suddenly turning and raging against me.
And how did that change make you feel?
I didn't really know what to do, because it didn't take her very long at all to tell me that she'd been abused by an ex of hers. And I said, oh, that's terrible. You know, a woman tells you she's been abused, and instantly, of course, I believed her and I said, you know, that's awful. But it did strike me as odd that it was one of the first things she'd said to me. And she was like, I probably deserved it. And she was kind of acting in this kind of victimized way. And I did think it was rather odd. But at the same time, someone says that to me, and the protector in me instantly was like, you know, that's terrible. You've been through that. Of course you didn't deserve it, etc., etc. And I, at the time, had a bit of time off from work, so I was at home. She didn't work or anything like that. So it was cool. We were spending the entire day together, every day, every night, and it was just the two of us. And it was really nice and really enjoyable. And then there were just little telltale signs. When she'd get angry, she'd really flip out. If we had a small argument, it didn't have to be over anything. A normal thing that could have been sorted out between two grown people became a huge issue, where she'd end up screaming the flat down. She'd hit her head against this mirrored cupboard. She'd hit her head against that. She'd hit her head against the wall.
So she'd be physically abusive to herself?
Yeah. So before she was abusive to me,
yeah.
she would hit her head until she was bleeding, and she would punch herself in the nose. And I initially would hold her arms down I didn't know what to do. And she would tell me, look, stop me from doing it, stop me from doing it. And then I spoke to her mum and I said, look, she's doing this. I don't know how to handle this. And her mum said that the doctor had told her, when she does it, just leave her to it and eventually she'll stop. And so I was like, okay, if that's the doctor's order, if I'm not to do anything, just leave her to it. And then she would scream at me while she was doing it, and it eventually became a daily thing. I would wake up to her screaming and hitting herself. And then that turned on me after, I would say a week into her doing it to herself, it suddenly became she was abusing herself and she was hitting me. I ended up with kind of deep scratch marks down myself, down my arms, down my back, on my chest. She was drawing blood. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to react. A few times the police were called. They came to my flat. The first time they came, I called an ambulance and I said, I need some help because she's got some mental health issues. And they said, is she being abusive to you, physically abusive? I said, yes. And they said, well, in that case, we need to call the police. That's protocol. That's just how they do it. So a police officer came around, and obviously as soon as the police got there, she calmed right down, was completely fine. And they said, did you invite her in? I said, yeah. And they said, look, we can't do anything. I said, she needs to be taken away to a hospital or something. Something's really wrong with her. They said, yeah, there's nothing we can do. You've invited her in. She's your guest, as it were. So they left. And then she was all very sorry. It didn't take her long to turn on the charm again. So not long after that, she said, look, I haven't got any money. I want to start working. I want to start paying half the rent here and, for it to feel like it's my place. Because when my son came over, I would say, right, you've got to go back to your house because I wanted some time with him. It didn't take her long before she was refusing to go. So I couldn't even get time alone with my son. And it was at that point where I was like, I'm not happy having my son around someone who's mentally unhinged. So I tried to break up with her a few times. She'd come back. But soon, I had that distance between her and my son. I wasn't allowing him to see her and likewise. And I was happy with that. But yeah, it didn't take long at all for her to, every time to come back and to start hitting herself, screaming down the flat and hitting me as well.
Well, it sounds to me from what you've said that she calmed down when the police arrived.
Every time.
That she has control over that.
Absolutely. 100%. So if any sort of authorities were there, she would calm down instantly. One time she did lose it at the authorities was the day when I woke up to her screaming in my face, what have you done? Why have you put this thing inside me? And she said that she'd done a pregnancy test that I wasn't allowed to see and that she was pregnant. And so we needed to go to the hospital. So that was the worst attack she did on me that time. And after everything had calmed down, I booked a cab to go to the hospital. And she went into the nurse's office, insisted that she went in alone. I said, all right, I'll wait out here for you. And after about an hour, she came out. And she came up to me, she said, we've got to go right now. So I said, all right, let me book a cab. And the nurse sort of rushed out and said to me, look, can I speak to you alone? So I went into the nurse's room and she said to me, she's not pregnant. She never was pregnant. She never has been. And I said, that's the final straw for me. I'm out. The relationship is over. It's done. So the nurse called her back in and was acting as a mediator, as it were. And the nurse said, look, he's leaving you. You can't do anything about it. He's decided he's going to leave. And, I've told him the truth that you weren't pregnant. You're not pregnant now. You never were pregnant. At which point she went mad at me, started trying to physically stop me from leaving the hospital. So the nurse had to get involved and actually pull her off me. Jesus. And I was super lucky actually that the nurse was there, because I went home that day, and as I was getting ready, I was, packing her things up. The police knock on my door and come in and say they're arresting me for assault on her. The first thing I knew about it was them bursting in. I think there were between 4 or 5 of them there. Blue lights flashing. I don't know what my neighbours thought. They came in, took me to the cells. I was kept overnight at Stoke Newington police station.
With no evidence at all.
Well,
No.
the only evidence was her word.
Yeah.
And so she'd even said to the police, well, I went mad at him in the morning, but then he started hitting me and this, that, and the other. And she had marks on her head, and from where she'd hit her head against the wall. And so they said, well, they've got these marks. And I was like, well, she hits herself. I know it sounds crazy. She hits herself. And now, luckily, I have a doctor's note from her doctor saying that she does that. So I can, I have proof that that's what she does. And it wasn't until the next morning where they got the doctor to examine me that they found all these scratch marks over my body and all these wounds that she'd inflicted upon me. And then, they obviously dropped the case against me. And so at that point, I thought, okay, she's out of my life. It's done with. But she had a key to my flat, and she let herself back in. And then sort of, wormed her way back in. I'm so sorry. I should never have done this. You should never have had to do this to me. You should never have had this happen to you. You don't deserve any of this. So I was so shocked and taken aback at this point. I didn't know what to do. I was very vulnerable. I accepted her back stupidly. And it didn't take long till we'd split up again. And finally I said, right, you got to take all your stuff out, and this isn't happening. And I texted her and I said, how could you do this to me? And she texted back and said, I knew that you would keep me safe. I knew that you would look after me. I knew that I was safe with you. And I said, what, so you took advantage of me? And she said, if I'm honest, yes. And so I've got that on text message, her saying she felt safe, protected, looked after by me, not abused in any way, And then later on, she wrote this blog about me, claiming just the most, made me out to be a monster, called me a monster at various times, said that was physically abusive to her, that I'd kicked her in the stomach and killed this baby that never existed.
Jesus.
And took that to the music press, to my record label, to every festival I was playing at. I was blacklisted from the music press, blacklisted from the radio. This is what my publicist came back and told me. My press agent and my radio plugger all came back and said, we can't work this. You're completely blacklisted. I had protests at venues I was playing at. I had posters put up, fly posted on outside of venues that I was playing at. So I thought, look, it's really hard to prove your innocence. It's really hard to prove you didn't do something, because you're trying to show something that's not there. So it's a very backwards way of doing things. So that's why we have presumption of innocence, So I went and I took a lie detector test. And I found this guy who, he works with the police, and he's completely accredited and licensed to carry out the lie detector tests. And they hooked me up. They had, measuring my pulse, my sweat, my heartbeat, everything, and it was I was all kind of hooked up to these machines. And he said, look, I said, all I want to prove is I've never abused a woman in my life. He said, okay. So he just, he asked me the simple questions, what's your name, and blah, 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 just so we could get a reading. And then, of course, I passed the test saying I've never, abused a woman in my life. So, I now have a lie detector test on top of her text messages, on top of photographs of what she's done to me, on top of her doctor's report saying, that she hits herself. None of it is enough for me to be able to clear my name still. Even her word is somehow worth more than all the evidence in the world that I have.
And through all that, how did your emotions cope with that?
I became utterly suicidal. When she put out a false accusation about me, my whole world fell apart because it just felt like everyone suddenly turned in on me. And I understand why. Because in the same way, when she came to me and said she was abused by her ex-partner, that protector in me came out and was like,
Yeah.
that's terrible. How could you go through that? And of course, if someone tells you that, you believe them. And so I had everyone turn against me. I ended up on the top of a car park, not knowing whether to jump off or not, and was very close to doing it. And I eventually came down, and I sort of went straight into an AA meeting, straight into an NA meeting, and I thought, all right, if I'm going to fight this and try and clear my name, I have to do it sober, and if I get drunk, I know I'm going to drive my car off a cliff or something like that. But I had these suicidal fantasies constantly. I was put on fluoxetine, a high dose of fluoxetine medication. They put me on various different medications, and then I was diagnosed with as having PTSD, which is a condition associated with people coming back from war, soldiers. And they put me on more medication to help me deal with that. So, she completely tore apart all my self-confidence. I had a good life before her, and I've been through a lot of hardships in life, and nothing has come close to what she put me through. The physical abuse is one thing. The psychological abuse that she's put me through has just, it's destroyed me.
Seems to be harder, doesn't it? The psychological abuse.
That's what lasts.
Hard, yeah.
That's what lasts a long time. And still, if I go on the tube now, I'm looking over my shoulder. I have this heightened sense of awareness. I'm super paranoid. And these are all symptoms of PTSD, and that's what she's given me. It's trauma.
So when people say when the abuse is over, that's it. You don't think that's just a magical cure-all. You think it lingers after the abuse is over.
I think it's a lifetime work to just get up and carry on. I have days where I wake up and I don't know what's the point. But I think it's a lifetime's work of getting up again, because there's no support for men who go through this. There's not one safe house. We're in London now, one of the biggest cities in the world, one of the most metropolitan cities in the world, and there's not one safe house for men exclusively. And this is something that happens all the time. Men are being abused all the time, and there's no support for them. When I came out with my story, I had people telling me, "Oh, it's just got a few scratches," and people try and minimize the fact of the matter is she was abusive. I've been abused by her, and people try and minimize it. People say false accusations don't happen. They do. I've lived it. I know my experience. And people say abuse against men is very rare. It's not rare at all. If you ask a group of men how many of them have been hit by their girlfriends in the past, there will be a higher number, and the fact of the matter is,
nobody sees that as abuse, do they?
People don't see it as abuse, but it is. And I think that, times are changing, and I think, we need to start talking about this a bit more and say, look, abuse does happen to men, and it happens in various ways. It happens physically, yes, but it also happens psychologically. And even if it were entirely rare, even if it were 1 in a million men who it happened to, don't minimize it when it does happen.
Yeah.
Don't minimize my experience, because I know the pain I felt, and I know what I went through. I know the trauma that I suffered. Murder is rare. Terrorism is rare. That doesn't mean they don't matter.
Yeah.
And these things happen far more than people allow themselves to think they do. And I think, we're going to see that in the coming years. We're going to see more and more men speaking out about the fact that there's no shame in it. There's no shame in the fact that you've been abused by a woman, because you didn't fight back. You didn't stand up and hit her. If you'd have fought back, that would be abuse. And rightly so, you'd be called abuser. It's very difficult for men who are going through abuse to get any support and to get any help. And so it was a very, very lonely journey. And it's only through hooking up, with people such as yourself and, these very, very grassroots support networks that have helped me, you know, and even if it's a case of just getting some identification from them, going, do you know, I went through that too, you know,
Yeah.
even if it's not a practical thing, it's just identification, you know, that helps sometimes. And just people going, look, I know what you've been through, and I've been there too, and just knowing that is enough to get me through some days, you know.
I know that you told me that your album Gospel Truth, that was about the year following the abuse.
Yes.
Did you find that cathartic to write?
I can't listen back to that album now, to be honest with you. It's really painful, and I don't know if I found it cathartic. I mean, I'm an artist and I'm a songwriter, and I feel like I have to write about whatever's happening around me. And we've always been a very sort of political band, almost a protest band. But at that point in time, that wasn't what I could write about. I was going through too much personal stuff, and I had to put it into that record. I had to just write about what was real to me. And at that point, you know, it's a very dark album, and compared to our other stuff, it's really dark, and I can't go back and listen to it myself, you know.
Did you find any other way of coping with it apart from the artist side of things?
I found it very difficult, I'll be honest. I go to, you know, recovery meetings every day, and I find that as a form of group therapy very helpful.
Yeah.
And really just getting identification from meeting up with different people who have been abused, or who are helping those who have been abused, or you know, there are various groups who are doing grassroots stuff that I find helpful. But overall, I think what links us all is that it's a very, very lonely journey, and we're told we don't exist, and so you're kind of put into solitary, you know, and it's a very it's a long journey to walk alone, you know. And I think, you know, the more men come out and the more men say, I've been there as well, I know what that's like, and yeah, it shattered my confidence, it shattered who I was, and I see there's a lot of patterns that go on in this, and that's physical abuse, yes, but also false accusations are a large part of it, because I think a lot of these women are very smart, and they know, these abusive women know very well that they can play up to a victim mentality, and they can play up to poor me, and be believed. And it's just another way of them abusing the victim.
Being in the public eye as you are you concerned at all that being within this documentary, that will affect that all over again?
Yeah, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
But if I don't speak my truth, I kind of feel, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know, I was raised on artists like Joe Strummer and The Clash, where it was all about 3 chords and the truth. And to me, I can go out and sing a happy pop song. I wouldn't be able to then lie awake at night and feel happy with myself. I can only speak my truth. And right now, this is an unpopular cause. However, it's the truth. And I'm willing to back an unpopular cause. I'm willing to, you know, I didn't choose to be a part of this. I was thrown into it. And here I find myself in a place where actually championing an unpopular cause, once again, is what I need to do. And so, in terms of, am I worried about it? Yes, because there's still a lot of shame involved in even just admitting that, you know, about what's happened to me. But at the same time, it's the right thing to do. And so, as much as I feel worried about it, I also feel a great deal of pride with being able to actually hold my head up with dignity and go, yeah, that happened to me. And yeah, I went through false accusations, and I've got nothing to hide. I've got absolutely nothing to hide whatsoever. And I've got all this evidence that is coming out. And so I can hold my head up with dignity and go, yeah, that happened to me, and I'm okay, and I'm fighting back.
And do you think your fans will understand that?
I think they're going to be very split. I think that there are going to be some who get it and some who don't, and I think that you know, they're a cross section of society. to be honest, as an artist, I can't really think about what people are going to like or what people aren't going to like. I can just make what's true to me and what's real to me. And if people take to that, then great. If they don't, then great. I make art for art's sake. I make it because I have to, because it's just something inside of me. That's my passion. I don't really think about whether people are going to like it or not. So I don't know.
Itch, going back into another relationship which you are in, did you find it hard to trust her? Did you find it difficult to be in another relationship?
Yeah, I think we both found it really difficult. She had seen what the other woman had written about me, so was completely aware of these allegations. And you know, I've been with her for nearly 3 years now, and she has been my biggest supporter. She has been there for me, very understanding, I couldn't have asked for a better person in terms of the support that she's given me and the love that she's given me. And it's not been easy on her, because this PTSD and the fallout from all of this has made me incredibly paranoid. And you know, I've been looking out for red flags and wondering if they're there. I've been really scared, you know, at times, and I've found it difficult to trust again, certainly in any way that I could have before. And so I've been so fortunate and lucky with just how patient she's been. And you know, she understands now that there are days, weeks sometimes, where I just need to be left alone and, you know, need to just be on my own and can't really be around people. And she understands that and has been very caring. And I've been super lucky. You know, I think there are a lot of people who would not have had the patience and the time and to put into a damaged person like me, you know. So I've been very lucky to have someone so supportive.
And did it affect your relationships with other people as well, maybe your family or the people that you work with?
I think that they've seen a drastic change in just my self-confidence. I think I would say, quite a happy, loud, confident person before. And they've seen how it's been a real struggle for me to build that back up again. I think everyone around me, because it doesn't just affect me, you know, it does affect my friends, my family, my partner, certainly, definitely everyone I work with as well. And yeah, I think they've seen me get broken down and then very slowly try and build myself back up again.
Well, anybody that's seen your music videos sees a very confident persona in those videos. Is that hard to do?
There was definitely times afterwards where I thought, I can't do this anymore. And I remember going on stage, we were on tour with a band called Skindred, and I remember coming off the first night of the tour and going, I can't do this anymore. I can't get on stage, and I can't fake it. I can't front it. And so it was a learning experience, and it felt like going on stage for the first time again. And this is, you know, 10, 12 years into my career. And it felt like just having to relearn everything again. And now I'm at a point where I'm comfortable on stage again, and you know, I can do what I do. But it was a relearning experience for sure.
Well, very interesting story, and thanks for speaking out.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.